Sorry, I had to check quickly just to make sure that I got my facts right. Now, if you recall, I became a Brony with episode 9 of season 2, and by the time that episode 14, the last roundup, premiered, I was already a big Derpy fan. Simply because of the massive amount of artwork and fan fiction that the fandom cranked out. And so by the time that episode 14, the last roundup, came about, I had no idea that Derpy was going to speak. And then Derpy spoke her first line, "I just don't know what went wrong." And then Derpy also addressed her as Derpy, as a nod to the fans. And I remember recording the episode on DVD. That's a thing that I have been doing ever since season 2, ever since I became a Brony. Well, that's actually something that I typically do anyway. If there's a show that I like, or that I become a big fan of, I try to record the episodes onto DVD. And the reasons for that is because, number one, I don't know if they're ever going to release all the episodes, like the whole season of something, onto DVD. Number two, I have the DVD so I can go back and watch it if I want to. Number three, don't know if they're going to release the episodes online so you can watch it. And number four, you don't know if any of these other supposed services where have these are going to get them online. And so I have been recording a lot of shows that I love onto DVD. And I recorded that episode onto DVD, the full unedited episode. And I remember after the episode aired, I loved it that Derpy spoke. We finally had a voice for Derpy. And in that time before episode 14 came about, I remember watching, seeing different things with Derpy, seeing different comics with Derpy and whatnot. Then episode 14 premiered, and Derpy spoke. And I remember just like several days after that, I remember reading about the controversy that the writer Amy Keating Rogers had received an angry letter from what the fandom dubbed soccer moms, because these people were offended by Derpy. There were supposedly people that were offended by Derpy, claiming that Derpy was a reference to people with mental disabilities, and that Derpy was made to be an insult. Derpy was made to be offensive. And the truth of the matter was not that. Derpy was called Derpy in the show and made that way because it was supposed to be a nod to the fans. And Derpy was not offensive. And that began what is now known in the fandom as Derpygate. And it's crazy because I lived through Derpygate. I was there whenever it started, and I'm still here after it's already said and done. I was there through Derpygate, the whole thing. At the time, though, I didn't have my channel started, and I certainly wasn't writing fan fiction. And I remember making a post, a journal on my DeviantArt with my thoughts on Derpy, which is actually still up. I mean, if you go over to my DeviantArt and go to like my earliest journal entry, you will still find it there. You will still find my post regarding Derpy all those years ago. It's still there. And I remember I was angry by it because I thought, this is stupid. Derpy is not supposed to be offensive. A character who was intended to be a joyful, naturally klutzy character. People considered this character offensive. Yet, there are shows that are created to be offensive and nobody bats an eye. And I thought, to me, Derpy was like the MLP version of Disney's Goofy. Goofy is a natural-born klutz. again, I saw no difference. And I remember the whole Save Derpy, I remember whenever the whole Save Derpy campaign started. There were videos, there were animations, there were references to Save Derpy in fan-made games. There was fan art, there was fan fiction, there was music. I remember the Save Derpy animation. I can't remember the artist, but it was the Save Derpy animation. And then there was another music video that was made called "Isn't It Great to Be Different?" Isn't it great to be different? Isn't it wonderful to be exactly who you are? And I remember hearing that song, and the song resonated with the fandom. It resonated for people. And we loved the song. I loved the song. And a lot of us tried. We did our part. A lot of people were trying to do their part to save Derpy. People were doing petitions. People were sending emails and letters and such saying, we don't hate Derpy. Derpy is not offensive to us. And I remember there were even people with mental disabilities that were saying, Derpy's not offensive to me. And it was kind of like a war in a sense amongst, like, we were trying to fight back, saying, you know, it was pretty much the fandom against these soccer moms. And we were trying to fight to save this character that we loved. And a lot of people were upset because we felt like, oh, okay, you're imperfect, you're not perfect, so what, you need to be censored because you're not perfect? And that's what people felt like. Like, okay, this character is natural, this character is a klutz, this character is a complete goofball. Are you saying because I'm that way, I should be censored too? I relate to Derpy because I'm a natural-born klutz. I'm a complete ditz. And actually, to be 100% honest, my eyes are not 100% straight either. I have looked in the mirror and my eyes are not 100% straight either. So I can relate to Derpy on being a complete klutz, on being a complete ditz. I'm not the brightest bulb in the box. And I remember the fandom was just trying to fight to save this character. And it was so cool to see so many people coming together, rallying to save this one character. And I remember then it was announced that Derpy would stay in the show. And the fandom rejoiced. We rejoiced because we felt like we had a victory. We felt like we finally had a victory. And I remember the episodes progressed throughout the rest of the season, of Season 2. And with Derpy, it became like a game of Where's Waldo. You would look in the episodes to try to spot Derpy. And I remember the episodes went by, we didn't see Derpy. And it was beginning to seem, I remember people were beginning to wonder, okay, where is she? If they decided to keep her in the show, where is she? And people were wondering, is this a lost cause? Did we fight for nothing? And finally, in the final episode of Season 2, I remember somebody showed a clip that showed Derpy, like, looking towards the audience, smiling and giving a wink. And the fandom, again, rejoiced, because it was pretty much Derpy saying, you know what, don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. And, of course, we continue, and from that point on, but I remember the whole Derpygate thing, what went down in the fandom's history as Derpygate. And a lot of people fought back against that, saying, you know, Derpy was not offensive. Derpy was not intended to be offensive. Derpy was meant as a nod to the fans. And Derpy, that's what Derpy was intended. Yet you had these sensitive parents that were like, oh, no, no, I can't have my child watching this, no. And so they started complaining. But the fandom won. We won. And I remember, whenever the whole thing was going on, I remember wishing that there was more that I could do. At the time, I didn't have my channel. And so there was nothing that I could do at the time to fight back. The only thing I could do was stand on the sidelines and cheer everybody on. And I still, even today, regret that I could not participate actively, that I could not do anything. But there was nothing that I could do. At the time, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I could do, how I could do it. But I remember just the community just coming together to trying to hold on to this character. And that's what it was about. It was about holding on to being different. That it didn't matter what you were, who you were different. And that was good. That's what the whole thing was about. It felt like if this character was taken away, it was pretty much saying you had to be perfect in order to exist. And there were people from all different sides, people from different, there were, so many people from different walks of life commenting and saying, I love Derpy. And Derpy needs to stay. And it was so cool to see so many people from different walks of life supporting this character and, coming together with the rest of the fandom. And we got Derpy back. And now she's here to stay. And I remember, again, every time that I listen to that song, Great to Be Different, I believe that's the title. Every time that I listen to that song now, it takes me back to those days whenever Derpygate was going on, whenever so many people from different walks of life were saying, it wasn't about, it wasn't about your intelligence, it wasn't about what you could do. We were all, and still are all, different. We're all unique. But we're all a part of the same fandom. We're all a part of the same community. And I remember the show progressed. And we continued, the fan art of Derpy, the fan fiction continued. The Save Derpy campaign died down because there was no need for it. But I still remember that. I still remember that. Just like it was yesterday. And I remember we continued to want Derpy to speak again. And I remember rewatching the edited episode of the last roundup and Derpy's name edited out and Derpy having a different voice. And the truth of that matter was that the reason Derpy sounded the way that she did in the first version was because they didn't know that Derpy was supposed to be a female at the time, and so they had a more deeper sounding voice for her, and so that's why they gave her a different voice in the second rendition, because they found out that she's supposed to be a female. And so the episodes again continued. Season 3 started, and again it was, we still had the game of where's Derpy? Every single episode you'd look in the background to see if you could spot her. And it was a simple game of, oh look, there's Derpy. Hey Derpy. And the episodes continued throughout Season 3, throughout Season 4. We got little references. We had scenes of Derpy and whatnot. And then we got Rainbow Falls. I don't remember the episode number, but we got Rainbow Falls. And at this point, it had been a little while since we had seen Derpy. Since we had seen the Derpster. And then I remember Derpy making her appearance in that episode. And she showed up in the episode at the door at Rainbow's room with that little flag. And I remember Derpy Brew someone added the genius tag. Thank you for that if you're still around. Somebody added the tag on the Derpy Brew. I think it was called the Derp Heard Round the World. the fandom went nuts whenever they saw Derpy. I remember watching so many reactions to Derpy's reappearance. It was so cool seeing so many people's like ecstatic reactions to Derpy coming back. It was so crazy. It was so fun. And then later in the exact same episode, whenever, I can't remember the line that Twilight said, but it was pretty much like dismissing someone like Derpy, kind of. And then Twilight turns to Derpy and says, "No offense." And then Derpy is just sitting there, and she just gives this shrug, like, no big deal. And again, I remember people laughing because we got the reference. We knew what it was saying. And then the episode ended. Derpy was still there. Derpy was still there, just smiling, waving her little flag, and it was so much fun. It was so fun and so cool to see the Derpster again. And I remember also like seeing all kinds of comics, fandom comics, and one particular one I remember specifically that stands out in my mind was whenever Pierce Smolder, Bald Dumbo Rat, started the Love Struck Derpy Tumblr. And man, I followed the heck out of that comic. I followed the heck out of that. And it was so cool. Like, for a long, like, up until we actually got to hear Derpy speak again in episode 100, like, I was so used to hearing Bald Dumbo Rat voice Derpy, how that he did it. I was so used to hearing that anytime that I imagined anything with Derpy, that's the voice I always heard. And I loved the Derpy and Dr. Tumbler, the comics that Pierce Smolder, Bald Dumbo Rat did, because it was just so cute. The artwork was beautifully done. The dynamics was well done. It was cute. It was fun. It was sweet. It was hilarious. It was just so much fun. It was so cool. And at the time, again, I wasn't a Doctor Who fan, so I had no idea the connection. All I knew was this guy was supposed to be like the 10th or the 11th Doctor or something. That's all that, like the 10th Doctor, that's all that I knew. And so I had no idea what the connections was whenever they were talking about the sonic screwdriver, about the TARDIS. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on, but I love it anyway. I had no idea what they were talking about, the references. And then the other guy, the other stallion that came in as well later on, I'm thinking to myself, who is this guy? Did this happen in Doctor Who? Okay, and but I remember following that heavily, and again, I loved it. And then again, I remember seeing references to Derpy in like different fan-made things that the fandom had made. And then I remember episode 100 premiered, Slice of Life, and yes, the fandom went berserk whenever we heard Derpy speak. And again, the first time since season 2. All those years passed, and then the first line we get to hear her say is, "Muffins." It's Derpy, and the first line we get to hear her say is the genius line of "Muffins." And then the episode focuses also on Derpy, and it's wonderful. It's so cool, and her voice is great, and she's got the wall eyes, and again, she's just like pretty much the MLP equivalent. She's pretty much like the Equestria, the MLP, or the Hasbro equivalent of Disney's Goofy. That's pretty much Derpy. Derpy is to Hasbro like Goofy is to Disney, and it's so much fun. It's so cool, and again, people were freaking out. I remember watching so many reactions, so many people freaking out, loving what they were doing with Derpy, and the references to the Big Lebowski that they did in the episode, and then at the end having, I can't remember what number Doctor, his scarf, and then having the Doctor say Allons-y, and again so many references to Doctor Who, and just the Derpy, like the Doctor and assistant deal as well. And oh my gosh, I mean, it was so cool. And then that right there, it basically solidified itself. You know, Derpy is official. Derpy is canon, even though her name was not said. Like, her name was also called Muffins, you know. But again, I remember just freaking out over that and watching a lot of other people freak out about it. And again, it's so crazy thinking back all those years ago, just the whole Derpygate experience, and just how many of us, including myself, wanted Derpy to stay, and how many people still love this character. And for me, Derpy is still a representation of being unique, of being different, of not being perfect, of being a klutz, of being a complete goofball. And that's what Derpy means to me. And there are people today in the fandom that will say Derpy is overrated. I know that. But for those like me, we don't listen to that. We still love this character, and we still want this character to stay. And I remember, again, the multitude of artwork that I viewed for Derpy, comics and fanfictions where Dinky was Derpy's daughter, and like, I loved the concept. Like, it was cool seeing these references. I mean, seeing these comics and such, these fanfictions where Dinky was like Derpy's daughter. And of course, for me, I always kind of, like, for me personally, I always kind of imagined that Dinky was like Derpy's little sister. But I remember other animations coming out. I think it was, I believe it was Kanishi Panda did an animation where Derpy saves Dinky and I think Amethyst from the Changelings and Canterlot. Beautiful animation, adorably done, and just so cool, so freaking bad A. There was a couple of different Derpy and Doctor animations, and like references to Japanese anime, and again, just really adorable, really fun. And I remember seeing just so many comics, and I remember seeing comics, I mean, like, beautiful, beautiful illustrations, beautiful pieces of artwork portraying Derpy in Fallout Equestria. The Ghoul Derpy, set after the Fallout Equestria deal, where she has like a little Q&A thing that was freaking cute. And just, I remember just seeing all of this stuff with Derpy, and it's, again, today it's still so cool. And I look at a lot of it, and it takes me back to the earliest days of the fandom, whenever I first started liking this character, and whenever this character was first becoming one of my favorite characters in the show. And she still is today. She's still one of my favorite characters. And I remember seeing the references to her in the show, whenever she was at, whenever in Stranger Than Fanfiction, whenever she had like this homemade Caballeron outfit that she made, whenever she was supposed to be like Princess Twilight in the second Halloween-based episode. And then whenever we also saw the giant Derpy in Luna's Dream, and just so many times we got to see her. We got to see her eating chocolate, and again, so many different things. And again, but that is my story, my memories of Derpy from the very earliest beginnings, whenever I joined the fandom, to now. So again, hope you guys enjoyed, and again, let me know, like, if you want to share your memories, your thoughts on possibly on this or other things as well. And again, thank you guys again for joining. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you hopefully in the next video that I do. Take care.